4, 3, 2, 1. Walk with me through the cellar door.
The storm is coming, Francis.
A portal to a more skeptical world.
Cellar Door Skeptics begins right now. Prepare for the revolution with your hosts, Christopher Tanner and Chris Hanna.
Welcome back to another episode of Cellar Door Skeptics. If you're all listening to this, hopefully last week didn't churn you off to some of the crazy kookiness that just kind of morphed into an episode. I don't know what to say.
That was a hot mess, man. It was a good time, though. We haven't just done like, and if you thought the show was cool or whatever, if you listened to us a few times here and there, let us know if you like that, like every once in a while doing a format of just unformatted whatever the heck comes into mind, because that really was a stream of consciousness of like an hour and a half, 2 hours, man.
Yeah. And the worst is so I went back and re-listened to it when I was editing it, and all of a sudden about a quarter of the way through I say something and then you start talking to the audience and then I call you out. I'm like, how did you know? Why are you talking to the audience on the show? And you're like, because you've been recording this whole time. I'm like, how did you know that? I can't believe you know that. Like, oh yeah, I know when you're recording me. I was like, no, you don't. Yeah, I do.
Yes.
You changing how you question. I'm like, no way. I guess it must be true. So now I got to find new sneaky ways to record you without you knowing whether I've been recording you or not, so I can use raw audio.
Well, it depends on if you're doing something. It depends on if you're doing something for like the afterwards, or if you're doing something that's going to sneak in to be in the actual show.
Well, I'll admit, I don't think it was. I don't. You do know I did not plan that to be the actual show.
No, I know, but I could tell when you were like, "Screw it, let's just record this," because you did change your tone, you changed the way you were talking. So like, because like every once in a while we used to just shoot we'd shoot the shit, and we would like before the show. And you would just have the recorder going on that, and we would put that in for anybody who's a Patreon. But we haven't really been doing that, and so like that, you could push a button, and you didn't have to change what you were saying and how you were talking. The conversation didn't have to be coherent or any kind of direction. But when you do it, when it's part of the show, you had to have some kind of direction and like some kind of real questions, and that's where it is. So like if you just, I guess, make it into a normal conversation,
yeah, it was
then
weird.
I won't catch you.
Yeah, it was, I don't know. Yeah, it was weird. We talked about like, I think I counted 17 different topics. There were 17 different topics I think we had until we hit that Christian music slump. And then all of a sudden the rest of the show is just that. So the best part was as I went back and listened to it, you were making suggestions on what I should edit in. And like, I didn't care at the time, I guess. And then all of a sudden now I went back through and I was like, oh, I can actually edit this in. And so that was kind of cool. That was nice to be able to go back and do something, that was kind of closer to what we did. Well, not when we started, but probably back before we even did this type of formatted show.
Well, I mean, we started off with you asking me about socialism and stuff, and we ended
we
on
were recording well before that, just so you know.
Well, I know that, but those were some of your first like serious questions that you had. So like you're like, oh, really? So what would the proper socialistic response to be, or whatever? Then, like, so all that kind of stuff. But like we went into like your history in Christian metal. And I mean, like, talk about bouncing all over the map. And so this episode's going to be a little bit different. We're going to the first topic isn't exactly a charmer.
No, and I won't butcher the wording. It's Mexican repatriation or repatriation, depending on which words you want to call it.
Well, I mean, you've been saying reparations, and I'm pretty sure we didn't give the Mexicans any reparations, but yeah, no, it's repatriation. And there's actually a really weird, relevant connection to the tax thing that's been going on with the current administration that I'll toss in when we get a little bit into that story.
Yeah. And just so for everybody's listening, if we do recommend, it is a 2-hour show, but go back and listen to the show from last week. You're going to get to know the host a little bit better. We don't do that thing all the time. Usually we're pretty structured. But for the show tonight, the topics that we've kind of picked out, I don't want to say we're going to do the SOTU, right? I don't care about the State of the Union, and it's kind of funny
really.
Because it's probably something we should cover, but I boycotted watching it And no, it's not because I don't have cable
Yeah.
this time. But I boycotted watching it because of the Orange Cheeto Monster. I'm not going to watch it. I'm not going to support him. You know, if it had been Paul Ryan, I probably would go back and watch it after the fact. At some point, I'm probably going to go watch or read up on it. But, you know, I couldn't bring myself to care. And, you know, so this show tonight...
I think I'll read it. I don't think I'll listen to it.
Ironically, tonight, the show will hit on some points that he hit on in his State of the Union address. But we're not going to talk about the State of the Union address directly. It's not going to be a topic that you're going to hear us on the show. We may do it later. But for now, we figured no one wants to listen to Orange Cheeto Monster talk any more than we have to. And from my understanding, he went over an hour and a half or something like that. And
Yeah,
like
an hour and 20 minutes.
I just can't even imagine that conversation. I don't know. Seems crazy to me.
That's why I might read it. I think I might read it. Just because you can sit and absorb it a little bit more, and I can read it at my own pace because he talks so slow sometimes. And when he's done with the sentence, he says the last word really slowly.
Yeah,
it drives me crazy. I just cannot stand his cadence. So like, if I read it, I can just fly through it at my own pace. I can write yuck next to whatever I don't want to. I don't like, and what I can look into a little bit more. So maybe we'll do a review of the text.
Yeah. But not this show. Not on this show. Also, I wanted to let everyone good things to come. We have a comedian, Ian Harris, that will be on the show. And I'm going to be doing a very lovely interview with him. Ironically enough, we'll probably talk a little bit about politics because I don't know if him and I agree specifically on certain things.
Ooh.
Yeah, he has some discussion about regressive left type nature. And I don't want to give the whole thing away because I just recorded it with him. But there is some disagreement points that him and I have. So that will be airing next week for everybody to hear and see. And then we also have an interview that will knock your socks off for somebody else that we interviewed about abortion clinics. And she did this little documentary that was just a short documentary about the bullying and bullying tactics that the right-wing conservatives are continuing to pull out on abortion clinics in conservative towns. And when I say that, you know, like I'm not against people protesting, right? But when you use a megahorn and speakers and a microphone and inside the clinic you can hear every word they're saying because they have that loud a volume, that's no longer a protest. You don't need that kind of microphone for 25 people. It's done as a tactic to try and draw people out.
Yeah, just to be as obnoxious as possible, maybe. It's I don't know. Sometimes there's a safe point to how you're protesting where it's like, yes, you're getting your point across, and sometimes you're just being a nuisance to public.
Yep. But Hannah, tell us about Mexican Repatriation. You like how I slowly pronounce the end of the word for you?
Well, you broke the syllables up, and the last word in the sentence wasn't a surprise for you. That's usually how Donald Trump, he thinks he's got the sentence done, and then there's like two more words, and he's like, oh no. But anyways, the Mexican repatriation is something that a lot of people have heard about. Not a lot of people have really read about. They don't teach it in the schools, mostly because it's a blemish on President Hoover's record. But basically what happened was in the olden days, so back in the 30s, we had, in 1920s and 30s, we had this really heavy boost of, it wasn't really a patriotic swelling, of nationalism. It was basically that in a guise of racism and scapegoating. And so obviously we know the Depression era was a nasty one, and there's a lot of big problems. And so there were a lot of people that needed to be blamed for these types of things. And so what happened was, as is being told now, is, immigration and people of Mexican descent, Latin American descent, Central American descent, they were the scapegoats. They were the ones that were ruining the economy. And on the other end, the Jews were blamed for a lot of stuff when you get up into the northern areas of the United States. But during this particular time, as many as 1.8 million men, women, and children were deported that were of Mexican descent. And the way they figured
like
out
current times, huh? It's almost repeating 100 years later.
Kind of. So what we're talking about now, though, is illegals. That is what they specifically say is if you are a green card holder or you're a citizen, whether you're of Mexican or Latin American descent, you're here, you got your card, however, legally you got it, you're in, you're good. But anybody else that's here that isn't here legally, you're gone. Well, in this time period, they didn't care. Essentially, people were deported just for having Spanish, Mexicanish sounding names. So and a lot of them were American citizens. Like there wasn't this, there were illegals that were deported, but a large portion of them were people who had their U.S. citizenship. I mean, this was basically rounding up American citizens that were brown or sounded like they had Latin American, Mexican sounding names, and they were just picked up and tossed out of the country. So, like a lot of people are saying that the idea of kicking all the illegals out and the tactics they're using are not very far away from what they have actually done in the past in the United States, and a lot of people are worried about some kind of tinderbox, some kind of spark starting something like this again.
Yeah, and there was there's been some articles obviously that have cropped up here lately because of basically them trying to get rid of DACA and this whole Republican outcry of we don't care, we just want to start deporting people type mentality. And there was this article that was talking about how teachers in certain states are actually telling students of Hispanic descent to carry identification, carry something, because
carry papers, please.
This happened before. And a lot of people are making this out to say, hey, this is what the Gestapo did, right? This is how the Gestapo started to get the people out and how the whole Nazi thing started. And I'm saying that's pretty extreme. I'll bite a little bit into that. That's a pretty extreme thing. But then you send this article to me and like, we were doing this? We're doing the same thing? Hold on a second. That's crazy. And then you read, there's another article about, and I'm not even going to try and say his last name. I'm just going to call him Benjamin from Israel. And, essentially the head honcho over in Israel gave a timeline to get Nigerians and I don't know if you call them Libyans, people from Liberia out of the country. Basically, hey, you need to get out. See you are no longer welcome here. And now they're offering to pay them to leave, but still, they're kicking people out of their country. And yet, we did the same thing how many years ago? And now, who do we have in office? And I hate having to have this conversation, but we have rhetoric in office right now. It's basically saying, how can we close our borders and how fast can we deport people? Awful.
Yeah. And
just
it's
complete
scary.
awful. There you go. That's the Trump thing.
Well, one of the things that, like you said, it's like people always use, the Nazi, the Gestapo, and other types of things. But I like to point out that yes, the Nazis use these tactics, but this is also not just any kind of a symbolic thing that you, of course, would associate with the Nazis, but any authoritarian regime, any xenophobic regime has used these tactics. Essentially, you want to vote in our country? I need 3 different kinds of identification. You want to stay in this country and you want to get a driver's license? I need your passport, your papers. Hey, I'm going to profile you. Your skin is a little bit darker. I should be allowed to look in your wallet and make sure that you're properly here. Like, these are things that authoritarian regimes do when it's just a natural distrust of the people in the country, and a constant policing and a never-ending, Big Brother looking at everyone. The idea of fear and terror is the main trending scope of the society, and I mean that's kind of scary. And so we've seen these types of things happening in the past, and this is an interesting parallel of something that's going on right now. So in the Atlantic article, it says getting rid of America's Mexican population was a random, brutal effort. For participating cities and counties, they would go through public employee rolls and look for Mexican-sounding names, and then just go and arrest and deport those people. And then all of a sudden there was a job opening. So we hear right now the idea that we have ICE should be going through, and they have been going through company employee roles and just checking names and then taking that name and checking it in the system. Oh, is this person here on a green card, on a visa? Is this person overstaying their visa? Whatever. And I mean, they're pulling people out of jobs and teachers, anything like that. And these kids and everybody is terrified. And then all of a sudden, we've got these guys that are leading our political offices, and they're saying we need to get all these illegals out because we're going to create jobs in their positions and their kind of like. There's a lot of parallels and a lot of messages. They may not be identical, but it's dangerous to be going back down these roads. And like I said at the beginning, that not a lot of people know about what happened here. This is something that Americans swept under the rug, just like the Native American genocides that we have had in our past that bring their heads roaring back every Thanksgiving. Well, this is something that it doesn't come back regularly because it isn't tied to any type of holiday. But we should know our own history, and we should be ashamed about these things. If anything, one of the reasons why I wanted to bring up, just so we could learn a little bit more about this, is someone else in the article says that we weren't rounding up people who were Canadian. It was an absolutely racially motivated program to create jobs by getting rid of people. And I would take that further and say getting rid of brown people. But I mean, this is something that we've done in this country. And if you gave some of the people who are a little bit more towards the right wing and in the Trump cabinet the power, they would do these things. I mean, without some of the more progressive and centrist politicians in the legislative branch right now, I really think that's the only thing holding us back. The executive branch and the state department from doing these kinds of things. That those few checks and balances that are still left from protecting people who are potentially American citizens but wouldn't get believed because maybe they didn't have all of their documentation with them when they went to the gas station one day.
Yeah, and I'll be honest, I didn't know this was part of Hoover's legacy, right?
No,
I did not know that.
Yeah, Hoover's kind of a mixed dude. Like Hoover, Wilson, there's a lot of stuff in the American histories that is not really broadcast. I mentioned Wilson because the Wilson administration and subsequent after that were really known for getting involved and kind of playing with politics in Central and South Americas, and in some cases really doing some absolutely terrible things. And we also did some of the same kind of thing in the Philippines and Indonesia. So I recommend anyone that's interested in some of these critiques, you can look into Noam Chomsky's books. He goes through the history of what they've done, and it's still something that I've been learning about. I've only been relatively aware of it for the last year or so. And it's really sad. One of the issues that I saw back to the Mexican repatriation, it says that they were children, individuals who left at 5, 6, and 7 years old. They found themselves in Mexico dealing with the process of socialization, learning of the language. They didn't even speak English. They were full-fledged American citizens. And back to the quote, they maintained an American identity, and they still had the dream to come back to my country. Like, these were Americans. This is the DACA kids that we're talking about here. If Sessions had his way, if a bunch of people in the Trump administration had their way, these kids here who have never had any kind of association with Latin America or Central America, they would, without a question, be in the same position as what had happened to these people in the 30s.
Yeah, and it's just some of the other things that they were doing, and it's kind of funny. They're trying to compare it, and I don't know how much I enjoy the comparison with the Trump administration, but they have this one quote in there, about a speech the president gave, saying protecting our workers also means reforming our system of legal immigrants. Well, hold on a second, my friend. Like, what are you doing? Are you looking at how do we change? Because you're worried that it depresses wages for the poorest workers. I don't know about that. I don't think that's the way that works. Like, there's not many people that come to my work and say, yeah, I'll do that for $5 an hour. We have legal ramifications for that. If you want to change that, why are we not putting up laws to tell farmers you can't pay somebody $2 an hour to pick your produce? That's what, if you want to do something, let's change that. And one of the arguments I hated this argument. Everybody's like, well, what's going to happen? We're going to replace those jobs. And then, the liberals are like, well, yeah, yeah, but who's going to pick your tomatoes for $2 an hour? Your produce is going to go through the roof. And it's like, well, hold on. That's not a good argument. You're saying we should continue to allow, Hispanic individuals to be abused so that they can stay here? Come on. That's horrible. Why would we even consider that a logical merit to this conversation? It's just not,
They both have their problems with those arguments, and saying that you want the immigrants to come in because they are a cheap workforce willing to work for peanuts. Yeah, that's not a very equal thing to do, in all reality. And so, like, if you bring a lot of these arguments in, obviously the conservative end of that is just like, you don't want these people in because Americans will fill those jobs and do those jobs. There's also holes in that. In the end, it really comes down to is like trying to create a good system that's streamlined and speedy. To me, they always talk about reforming the immigration system, but in most cases they add more complexity or more time to it and make it more difficult or whatever. Or in some cases, like what they're doing now, is they're trying to pull back on Chuck Schumer's 1990 era changes that said that they wanted to bring in that they're calling it chain migration, but they called it family reunification at the time. But they were basically reuniting families and allowing, if you have a connection in the United States, that you'll get preference over someone who doesn't already, which that causes issues and problems. And they want to bring it back more towards like what Canada does, which is something they used to do in the United States, which is basically a skill or a merit-based thing where what are you bringing to this country to help this country out more than do you know someone here already? But there's problems with that. Is if you look at the American workforce and the American graduate degree programs and you compare them, in countries like Africa, poor and troubled countries, the per capita degree and graduate degree per capita in those countries is actually higher than in a lot of society, or a lot of portions of our society. And so these people, they make a huge importance, and they put a lot of need into higher education for their communities. And in the United States, we kind of look at it like, oh, it's so expensive, and we price ourselves out of that game. The rest of the world is really keeping an eye on, how the United States is basically not doing as much when it comes to degrees and skills anymore. We don't teach skills in schools, and our degree graduation rates are going down per capita. Well, this new immigration plan, skills and education and doctorates and, having that kind of stuff, in other countries, they have that. In a lot of countries, they have that more than we do here with our low education system. So, like, there's going to be problems that they're going to have there because African and Indian and Southern Asian countries that have super high graduation rates and degree rates, they're going to be able to get into this country really easy. So, I mean, what you're doing is you're basically creating a small distance between the people in these countries who have the money to get a degree, and then you're just essentially going to put a wall up against any poor people from ever coming into this country. I mean, There's all kinds of problems there.
Yep. And the article kind of goes on to talk about, how that can, how different parallels can happen, right, to what we're seeing now versus what happened before.
Yeah.
And, in fairness, again, I don't like the large nature of, hey, how do we make a sensational article, for the people to read, right? I don't need that to read this article. And, they're kind of talking, they go back and they talk about different things that were happening back then, right? And they talk about how you could compare it to the White House. Now, the reason they're comparing it to our current administration is because the White House is working to make efforts to expedite and expand deportation, but it means no hearing, no judicial review, and it could be ready as a summary deportation, right? So they're circumventing or trying to circumvent, and you kind of touched on it a little bit earlier where you're saying, hey, some of the legal immigrants may not actually be illegal immigrants. They just may not have their papers. And if you go through rush bureaucracy, those people could get deported too. And they also talk a little bit about Trump appears to be doing something very similar, right? So Hoover's administration outsourced raids, targeting and deportation to local and state officials, right? Because how can you expedite this? How can you make this faster? How can you reduce your costs to the federal government? Well, allow your local governments to do it. They can profit off it in the ways they want to. And so because they were doing that, people that aren't versed in specific constitutional laws are not able to see understand what they're doing versus what should actually happen. And if you have it on a mass scale, again, this is a little conspiracy theorist, but if you take this on a mass scale, right, and it happened in every state, there wouldn't be any way to bring, repercussions to these states as easy. I mean, what are you going to do? Fine every 50 states for not violating it? You're still not going to get these people back. You're still going to, remove them from their homes. You're going to separate them from their loved ones. You're going to send them back to Mexico. And you're not going to actually solve any problems. And the problem is, if you do this illegally, all you're going to do is actually circumvent our entire legal system. And by doing that, all that means is that you're going to bring anarchy a little bit closer, because there's going to be some of us that are going to be like, look, you're violating the Constitution, therefore you don't care about it. At this point, we might as well not care about it either, and we're just going to go after you now. And, as much as I want to see anarchy happen, on some side of the things, I don't want this to be the catalyst for it. I don't want to see a catalyst of deporting millions and millions of, Hispanic individuals out of America and breaking families up to be a catalyst for a revolutionary, maybe even a revolutionary war again.
But you got a little Jeffersonian thing there, watering the tree of, was it the tree of liberty with the blood of patriots?
It is. And
it kind of feels like it. It's scary. One thing that I will say is that full revolutionary thing, I don't think it's that close. One, because in the Wilsonian era and the Hoover era, we saw a lot of agreement and supporting enforcement from those state polices that you were mentioning. It doesn't seem like that's been a case. I mean, how many times have you heard that like sanctuary cities, sanctuary states are basically saying that, sorry, ICE, you guys are doing this immigration deportation stuff. Our state resources will not be helping you in any way, shape, or form. And that kind of resistance, it does make me feel a little bit better. One, because obviously those police officers are not trained in most cases in deporting and full on civil rights of citizens, non-citizens, and all that kind of stuff, which you mentioned before, which is really good, because I like the police officers that are trained to do their job to be in that area of their expertise. Then we won't have people accidentally shooting people because of situations that are outside of their training. And then on top of that, it's nice to see more checks and balances of, let's say, the Justice Department kind of pushing a little bit too hard, and democracy is kind of pushing back, saying, listen, we need immigrants and refugees and all of those kinds of people throughout the history of this country have been part of the biggest booms and the best economies that we've ever had. So I like the idea of immigration reform, changing some things, moving some things around, trying something else so that everybody gets a little bit of what they want. But the idea of like these slamming these walls and grabbing people and yanking them out of the country, like we've done this before, and we saw all kinds of problems from that. And if you came to my community, let's say if there was some kind of atheist deportation and you started to bring people and destroy lives to the point where they were irreparable, I would think that you would create criminals. You would create people on the edges of wherever you dump them off who are going to do whatever and anything they can, one, to survive, or two, to get revenge on the people who destroyed their lives. And in places that are pretty lawless and just south of the U.S. border in Mexico, we hear gangs and things that are essentially totally running towns and cities. There's no police. There's no nothing. I mean, I would hate to see these actions make things worse for those areas and have that kind of push of violence and crime and lawlessness push its way back towards the border for the people that we kicked out. Because unfortunately, the entirety of the United States has to live with the reputation of what our administration does. And I'm not comfortable with it. I'm just not. And so I would hope that learning about this, a little bit more could help people be a little more hesitant, or maybe want to take a little bit more time with the idea of reforming our immigration system to something that is so binary, so isolatory like this, just to kick people out of the country, because we've done it before. And it does not, it doesn't match with what I believe the United States stands for when it comes to, the liberty and justice of all people and equality and all of that, the American experiment.
Yeah, exactly. And it's kind of sad. I don't know, Hannah. To me, it almost seems a little sad that this is a forgotten history. And it almost feels like it's starting to repeat itself a little bit. Not in the same way the article tried to make it out to, but
it's not exact equivalent. There are some issues and dangers with false equivocation in these types of arguments, but correlation is not causation.
Exactly.
So there's similarities. We need to know about them, and maybe those can inform our choices in the future. There's no guarantee that what happened in the past will repeat itself exactly in the future, but there's always the possibility that something terrible can happen if we don't learn about what we've done. Exactly.
And as we close out this segment, one of the quotes from the NPR segment, which it does a so much better job than we do because they actually interview an author. But
it's an awesome listen. I highly recommend it. That's why I put the link in here.
Yep. At the very end, the interviewer says, "So one of the takeaways, both of your research and of your own mother-in-law's story seems to be that there's no matter what your plan is for the deportation of Mexicans who are not here legally, there is no clean way of doing it without breaking up families. And so many children are born here and they are citizens." That's powerful. Don't be part of the generation that wants to break up families. We're going to take a quick commercial break, and when we come back, we have more Cellar Door Skeptics discussing wealth in 2017. We'll be right back with more of an amazing show. We'll be right back, folks.
Hey, this is Keith.
And this is Jen, and we're from Not Another Atheist Podcast.
You're listening to Cellar Door Skeptics.
Join the revolution.
If you'd like to join the ranks of Patreons and sponsor the show, head over to patreon.com/Cellar Door Skeptics. For less than a 20-ounce soda or an energy drink each week, you can help sponsor us, the hosts, and our charity of choice. Patreon helps Cellar Door Skeptics create better content, become better activists, and it's going to help you stay healthier by drinking one less soda or one less energy drink each week. Click the link in the notes of the show to sponsor us today because we bring the discussion with the sources.
Hey, my name is Wesley. I'm from the Atheist Nomads podcast. Kick back a while and listen to my friends on the Cellar Door Skeptics.
Now, back to the show.
She said, "Come, baby, got a license for love. And if it expires, pray help from above. Because in the midnight hour, she cried more. With a rebel yell, she cried more. Wow. In the midnight hour,
Mom. And welcome back to Cellar Door Skeptics. Thank you all for joining us for segment number 2. We had to play a little bit of Billy Idol there because as we went into the commercial break, Hannah said, you just said more. And he's like, I think that's a song that I used to listen to growing up. I just don't know the name of it. And I was like, I don't know. Yeah, let's look it up. I was like, Google more. Yeah, that's not a song. And then he's like, no, it's Billy Idol. And I was like, no. And then we had to just play it for everybody so you can hear how similar I must sound, I guess, to Billy Idol in Hannah's eyes. Now, if I could only look as amazing as he did, or does now, then, at least it would be inconsequential.
Oh, Billy Boy, you want to look like Billy Boy? He looks like an old catcher's mitt now, man. So I don't know if I would go.
But he's very toned and muscular. I mean, he's.
He's.
You look at my fat ass, and he's just gonna go, wow, okay.
All right, well, maybe, it would be a good thing that he could look like him. But anyways, you hit more 3 times just trying to dump out of the segment. That's the only reason why I thought. I didn't think you sounded like Billy. I mean, hell, it'd be pretty cool if you did, because I'd make you sing on the podcast here, and we get a whole bunch of hits.
I don't know about that. Well, we decided for the second segment we wanted to talk about the world's richest 1%.
Yay!
And how more than $8 of every $10 of wealth created last year went to, you guessed it, the world's richest individuals.
Yeah.
So how could that be, Hannah? How can, in our society, I mean, when you hear those numbers, you just think that can't be right. There cannot be 80% of the wealth cannot be going to 1% of the world or of the nation. That just seems crazy to me.
Well, it's the world too. So what we're talking about here is the 80% of the entire planet's income. So that's another thing here. The United States has a really big problem with income inequality. It's really bad. The top 1% and then the top 1/10 of 1% own something like over 95% of the country's income. And so the United States really has a massive problem. But they're also saying that this is a very consistent thing throughout the world, even in the more socialized countries. When you average out the entire world, we're looking at $8 of every 10 go to 1% of the people. This is reported from Oxfam International. And there's an international confederation of 20 organizations working together with partners and local communities in more than 90 different countries. So this is kind of like the World Pew Foundation when it comes to dealing with poverty. So like we've talked about this in the past, that Pew is just a good foundation when you're looking at, maybe their name's a little funny if we're talking Star Wars thing here. It's like a pew, but Pew's a trustworthy resource when it comes to dealing with statistics in the U.S. Oxfam is a trusted resource when you're dealing with poverty resources and numbers when it comes to the entire country or the entire world. Because, I mean, we're talking 90 different countries out of the 270, I think it is, in the world now, as far as nations or whatever. But this is, like you said, how can this happen? Just what are your thoughts? Because I have a couple of theories. I'm guessing that we're probably relatively similar. Like, what do you think is like the reason that this kind of stuff happens? Like, what do you think is like helping keep this 8 out of 10 go to this small group of people?
Well, not to sound libertarian, but I would almost say that be that larger governments allow for this. No matter, and I don't think it's whether it's a democracy or an authoritarian type government. I think that a lot of it is based upon not having enough regulations and allowing for, people to make backdoor deals that benefit them that skirt some of the laws. We have too many gray areas for a lot of the different businesses. And you're kind of not quite the libertarian, because the regulation thing isn't exactly the libertarian thing. No, you're right. But, some of me says, yes, it's the government. We need to burn it down, which is the anarchist in me. But, I just look at this and I say, yeah, we have great labor laws. And, right now with my organization, we're giving out raises for the year. Yep. And I sit here.
A lot of people are.
And think about it. And I go, I have this article you put in front of me. And I sit there and go, well, if we could take even 1% of that back, how much more could we give employees to live on? How much more could we make their lives a little bit more comfortable? And
then it doesn't even have to go directly to the employees. So if you think about that, 1%, so $1 out of every $10 in the entire world would probably cure almost all of the homelessness and most, if not all, of the hunger on the entire planet. Like, we make trillions and trillions and trillions and trillions of dollars on the world markets, everything added all together. So take $1 of that, take it from the richest people in the world, and give it to just evenly across the board to people in need, like the poorest of the poor everywhere in the world. And you're talking huge changes to the income distribution throughout the world. And so, it doesn't even have to go specifically into the wages or whatever, but obviously that would bleed that way. But in the end, it's just seeing the vast amount going to such a small number of people. Like you said, I think it's got something to do with the systems of government that have been created where there's a lot of backroom dealings, as you said. But what I also would like to think is that there's a lot of places where capitalism is let just completely run rampant. Now, the idea of capitalism itself, competition and driving down the prices and things like that so that it's more favorable for the consumer, it seems to have been kind of repurposed, and so that it's a good different forms of capitalism are now being used as a good way of maintaining power and wealth for a few people while forcing through fear tactics and whatever to keep people from really I guess overthrowing the these systems that are holding them down. And so what this entire article is basically doing, what Oxfam is doing, is that they're kind of trying to pick out what are some of the things that we can do. Maybe we're not going to attack the 1% and just go right after the top dogs. We're not going to grab our pitchforks, and we're not going to bring the plutocrats down to the city square and cut their heads off. So what can we do to kind of take some small chops out of this? And what they're talking about is the indicator that the billionaire boom, which is something that's been happening a lot. Tons of billionaires are being created, but they are not a sign of a thriving economy, but a symptom of a failing economic system. And this is the executive director of Oxfam. So I don't know if you like the idea of winning the lottery, creating a half a billionaire or a billionaire or something like that. Like, that's a great thing that we can all aspire to, because tons of people live that life. Like, they want to buy a lottery ticket and maybe become a 300 millionaire or something like that. But like, if you're creating tons of billionaires, it's an awesome thing to have. But in effect, you're basically taking that money from the people at the very bottom and concentrating it with a couple of people. So if there's tons of billionaires being created in certain countries, you're taking a lot of wealth and distributing it not downward to everybody, you're concentrating it. And so this is an issue that what you're saying, like, there's an economy that's not taking care of everybody if there are tons of billionaires booming in this situation or whatever. So like this last week at Davos in Switzerland was this World Economic Forum. And this is, obviously Trump went and talked and he got booed, which is nice. This was nice. But the thing that was creepy is a lot of people were terrified about what was going to happen. Is Trump going to go there and start swinging his big stick around and just be an embarrassment? Well, weirdly enough, a billionaire like Trump fit right in with these people, fit in with, the richest people in the world who are going there to like kind of sort of guide the world's economic systems supranationally. So like, these people are kind of setting the world markets and a lot of these plans outside of any kind of nation, outside of anything like that. And so obviously the heads of state and everything are showing up there, but this is the billionaires club. These are the richest people in the world going there and just kind of hobnobbing with each other. And Trump fit right in with that. I mean, he's what did you say? He's worth $10 billion. That puts him way up there. As much as we all think he's a jerk and a jackass, he should fit right in, rubbing shoulders with the richest people in any other country.
Yeah. And the kind of the funny thing here, we had that tax bill, and this is the first week, and I know you don't work for any company, you just own yourself, but this is the first week our paychecks reflect the Trump thing. And it's kind of funny, I have a little story. So the guy that sits with me in the office, he's a big Trump supporter, huge Trump supporter. But he knows I'm very anti-Trump, and I don't even talk about it that much at work. But he knows I'm the liberal, progressive, atheist, or at least secular person at work. And so it's just kind of funny. So today he goes, "Hell yeah! If you check your paycheck, man, our paychecks on Friday, we're gonna have a little bit of extra money in there." I was like, "Oh, okay, that's cool, I guess." And he's like, "Yeah." He's like, "It's not much." And I was like, okay. He's like, yeah, just like $20, so like $1,000 a year. But that's all Trump said he was going to do. I was just sitting here going, okay, so $1,000 is quite a bit of money in fairness to my life, So that's more than what I would thought. And so then all of a sudden I go in to look at my check history, and I go, I just lost $2. And he's like, no way, no way, that didn't happen. I was like, yeah, I just lost $2. My last check was $2 less. And he's like, you're looking at that wrong. And in fairness to him, I didn't know I was at the time. So like, I went back and then I compared, for whatever reason, my check history didn't include current week, blah, 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 blah. And so I did go back, and it's not $20. It's 18. Mine is 18. So,
so 18 a week, or is it biweekly for you?
A week. So essentially you 18. Figure $80 a month. It's $1,000 a year, something like that. But still, even in that's, again, if that was given to the very low income, that could make a difference. $1,000 could make a huge difference. But it's not actually addressing a bigger issue with poverty here. It's not actually, it's not like they went back and said, okay, we're going to bill the richest people more.
Yeah, no, they reduced their basic taxable rates, and we had this conversation in the past about most of the income for really rich people. If you remember that doctor comparison with the hedge fund kid or the trust fund kid, the income taxable rates that they have are different when you're basically making money as capital gains versus standard income. And so a lot of people at the top who are like, when people like us are like, oh, it's fine, they're leaving their top rate at 39%. Well, most of those people don't claim any income in the standard income bracket. They're claiming it as capital gains on investments, and they put it into real estate and whatever. So like all of those things saw drops and easements, and they saw things where we were moving the estate tax and stuff. So like there are tons of places where taxes were lower for really, really rich people. And you and I, we're seeing a break. That's pretty nice, but it's not going to be anything that's going to be anywhere near the amount of benefits that the people at the top are going to get because they have much, much more money.
Yes.
But and the other end, on the other end of this is that's what they're talking about here, is that the new tax plan is kind of mimicking where all of this wealth was created last year. Is the people at the top are going to get the majority of that tax break, because most of that stuff is going to be through corporate tax rebates. And something that I didn't even touch on the repatriation from the last segment, but it was a fun play on words, is right now the Trump administration did a special 1-year thing, I think it is, with the tax plan, that people who have large sums of money kept outside the country can bring it back in at a low 15% tax rate. Or 15 or 13%. It's significantly lower than what they would have paid, even though they've been just storing this money, hiding this a long ways away, and just trying to keep it out of the tax system. Now they get to bring it in here. So essentially they're almost rewarded for keeping their money out of the system. And I mean, all of these different types of, jumping through hoops or whatever, this is still just benefiting the top. And so the question is, does trickle down economics work? Is this money going to come down to us? And all of this wealth that's created, if they're saying that all of that wealth went to the top 1%, that means that money didn't go down. And so we're seeing this every year. We see this massive amount of wealth created go to the top, and we're not seeing it come down. And a tax break like this, I'm going to go out on a limb and say that since we don't see it on the average just all over the world, the United States is not going to see a nice trickle down effect just because of our tax bill.
Nope. And it's kind of funny. Oxfam America. They have this. One of the articles, the politics of poverty, right? That goes along with what we're talking about. They talk about this and they say, okay, the economy's booming, right? Yeah, it is. But guess who owns all the stocks? Who owns all this? Yeah. The stock market's going up. Shareholders and billionaires, not the average American. I don't know how much money you have invested in stocks, right, or put away for savings. I don't have a lot. I'm in my mid-30s. I should have a lot more. My dad probably has quite a bit, but my dad started late in life too. But, they talk about it and they say, okay, so yeah, you're right. The stock market is booming, but it's not benefiting you and I. It's not benefiting a poor people who can't actually afford to buy into stocks because they just got to live. And then on top of that,
we have no disposable income.
Yeah, exactly. On top of that, they talk about how the Trump administration wanted to bring in all these jobs, but so far they've only created, 2 million jobs, if that. And
well, I mean, that's a lot of jobs.
It is, but it's under what they predicted. And they're taking the same precedent that the Obama administration did, which is one of my largest critiques of the Obama administration and his BS about how he created more jobs and got the unemployment down. He did do that, but unfairly. And he created a bunch of jobs that aren't good. Federal minimum wage is still stuck at, $7.25 an hour? Benefits aren't enforced. We aren't seeing, schedules. And even though productivity and profits climb upward, who's going to benefit from it? Not you and I. We're not seeing the dollars at all.
No, not really. And I definitely 100% agree with your point there. It's just that, the general incomes, have not been increasing as far as wages are concerned. And the average people, more than 50% of the people in the United States don't have any money in Wall Street. So like Wall Street does not an economy make. You know what I mean? Like when we see 26,000 on the Dow Jones, over 50% of this country says that doesn't affect me at all. If anything, it might benefit the company I work for. If I work for a major company who is, riding on the coattails of the Dow Jones what is nice? I can't remember some of the other ones, but in the end, in all reality, that is not going to directly come down to us at all. And so that's one of the things they talk about in this in the CNN Money article, is that the government should focus on policies that lead to fair distribution of wealth and stronger workers' rights. We keep saying things from the current administrations. We see things from the current economy and the leaders with the Republican grabs for all the governorships and a lot of the state legislatives, is that we're seeing this right to work stuff, which has been proven by economists to be almost as bad, if not as bad, as the idea of trickle down economics. It just does not help. Reducing the strength and power of the nation's workforce and giving that power back to corporations, the right to work, so you can come into a country, or you can come into a company, benefit from anything that union has worked for and bargained for, but you don't have to pay any dues into that union. So essentially, you reap the benefits of everything the union's done before, but you're starving the union of any kind of wages so they can maintain what it's got. And in this country, we only have like a 7 to 9% union workforce now, which is one of the biggest signs of economies that become much, much more plutocratic and oligarchic, is because we don't have worker representations when the market goes bad, and the people at the top, they're going to cut everyone else, and they're not going to take any payment cuts on their end. So like we have the idea of what happened during the Great Depression, when we talked about just around the areas of repatriation in the last segment, about one of the things that drove people to pick Mexicans as scapegoats is when the corporations are not held liable by unions, they make really bad decisions. When banks can invest in sketchy markets, and then they lose everything because the market crashes, the banks don't fail, the banks don't get killed, everybody else loses everything, and then people who own the banks just cash out, and then the bank closes down and goes bankrupt or whatever. But those kinds of sketchy things like workers' rights can check the super, monopolistic corporations and stuff that we have in this country. But Oxfam and CNN Money and RT, one of the other articles that I had in here, they basically say that the weakness of the union workforce is a major a point as to why income inequality isn't very good in other countries and is not as good as it used to be here.
Yeah, exactly. And I don't know. We can only harp on this for so long, right? But the economy's being built on the backs of us, and the biggest qualm I have with how the Trump administration is spinning this is hey, look, I'm giving you more money back. The Republicans are like, hey, take more money. Look at this. How can you disenchant us when we're giving you extra money back? You're going to get more money in your taxes. You're going to get more money in your paychecks back. That should be beneficial, right? And so even somebody like me can go, okay, hey, that's great, right? I can actually probably afford an okay couch. Every couch I've had has been something I bought off Facebook. I've never once bought a brand new couch in my life.
I bought my first one, and it sucks. So good to know. I've never bought brand new furniture outside of, I bought one brand new bed in my whole life, and I had that bed for 15 years almost. Before it finally gave up the ghost. But all that this is going to do is allow us to buy more needs, trinkets, so that help fulfill some of that gap. So again, and if you go down to the lower income worker, they're going to get that extra $20 in their paycheck, and yeah, that's going to be a half a tank of gas for them. That means they could splurge a little bit and either buy fast food, or they could splurge a little bit and maybe buy their kids a couple extra toys. But what are they doing? They're not taking that money and actually being able to go back and invest it. Because none of us have enough money to actually, truly invest the way we should be investing if we don't want to work until we're 80. You like to. I won't want to. And I don't want to.
You will. And but you're ruining the point, asshole. But nobody's able to actually put this money back into themselves. A, and B, we aren't doing anything to help educate people on how we need to do this. You know, like my company, they have we have matching benefits for I don't know, it's like $0.25 to $1 or something like that for your money for stock market trades and stuff like that, whatever they call that, you know, investments, opportunities. We have a free financial investor that comes into our company and works with people. And I'm watching the people that sit in the office with them, and they come out and they're all excited. You know, I was like, hey, good, I'm glad you're able to do this. And then a week later, they're like, yeah, we actually cut our contributions back. And I was like, well, why'd you do that? And they're like, well, I don't think you understand. Like, when it actually started coming out of my check and I was missing that $50 a check, like, yeah, Chris, that was my extra spending money. Like, I go out every weekend to Flint to visit family because, you know, I have family in Flint. Oh, okay. And then, you know, like, that $50 was my gas money, you know, and not all of it, but Chris, that was gas money. And like, I can either choose to save for my future, which I don't even know what it could be, or I could go see my family. And so, yeah, in a market that I'm so scared of it crashing and losing everything that I put in it too. I mean, there's a fear there. Like, I don't think people trust the market. And you're right, there is. And as we close out, that's kind of the biggest thing here is, yes, the whole point of this is that, yes, the top 1% is taking all of our money. But the bigger... they're doing great. They're doing great. They're all doing just fine. But the bigger problem is that we aren't electing, again, and I'm going to harp on that. That's my mantra this year. We are not electing enough people that can actually change what we put into the pockets of the lower income people to actually make a difference long term. All we're doing is looking at a narrow, short term focus, and we're missing out on the long term appeal. Grassroots, baby. Exactly. With that being said, we're going to take a quick commercial break, and we'll be right back with more and more and more Cellar Door Skeptics. We'll be right back, everyone.
Hello, I'm Miss B. Haven.
I'm Demanda Wright.
And we're promoting secular feminism.
And you're listening to Cellar Door Skeptics.
Considering how you want to help Cellar Door Skeptics, head over to iTunes or your favorite podcast app and give us a rating, because every rating helps push us in front of new listeners. And since our main goal here at Cellar Door Skeptics is to provide the most accurate information possible, we hope that more ratings will mean that more people get to hear the topics that we're presenting. We don't insist that we get a 5-star rating, but Hannah's favorite number is 5, and the more gold stars he gets, the more special he's gonna feel. So what do you say? Head on over to iTunes or Google Play, give us a rating, and help engage with Cellar Door Skeptics today. Looking for something new and exciting, or maybe just a change from the old Atheist Show format? Cellar Door Skeptics Podcast provides listeners with hours of enjoyment each week on Spreaker and iTunes. Check us out as we talk politics, religion, science, reviews of books and music, along with the occasional interview just for a twist. Join Christopher Tanner and Chris Hanna every Tuesday night at 8 p.m. Eastern as they bring fresh content to you. Walk with us through the cellar door as we help you prepare for the revolution. You can find us on Spreaker, iTunes, YouTube, and even on Facebook.
This is Trav Ramone, host of the By Any Means podcast, and you're listening to Cellar Door Skeptics. Prepare for the revolution. We have cookies.
Now, back to the show.
So during break, I got up, Hannah, and I was in the kitchen, you know, making another drink, and it was kind of funny. I look in my living room, my dog's sitting there, and she's just staring at me. Your new fluffy dog? Yeah, my new what dog? Your new fluffy dog, man. Yeah, my new fluffy dog. It's got all soft fur. Yeah. Yes. And she was kind of staring at me, and I sat here and thought, I said, I wonder if she thinks I'm crazy, because here I am talking to this weird glowing screen into this big black thing that makes no sense what it is, because she can't play with it because I have to keep it up. And here I am talking like I would to her, but yet not to people, her. But there's no people. Yeah. I wonder what the dog thinks. I don't know if their sentience is that clear, but I do
I do bet that they understand communication between creatures, and now they think your computer is a creature, a thing. Now your computer, your Mac, is a thing to which the dog must defer authority. Oh, you are a friend of the master. I must bow down to you.
You just gotta wonder. And my wife goes, "Are you going crazy? Like, who thinks of these things?" It's like, I don't know. It was just one of those. Like, I got up to make a drink, and the dog looked at me like, "You're talking to somebody that's invisible, but not to me. I'm right here, mother." Like, hello. All you got to do is come over and talk to me. I'll be more than happy to entertain you. But yet here we are, talking to each other on invisible screens.
Hello, McFly. What's the problem here?
Exactly.
Oh man, no, I don't know. I don't know what the dog's understanding is. So like my two dogs, Bella and Hitch, the pit mixes, they understand that like computer and microphone, as far as I know, because they don't do anything weird around either of them. Like they don't even remotely think that they're living things, and they've never like tried to do anything to it. So like I would think that your dog probably just sees your behavior as like, oh, that's just a thing that large biped hairless creatures do. But as long as I just ignore it and pretend like they're normal, maybe they'll still feed me in the morning. Like, I mean, you know what I mean? It's like, I'll just let them it's just a quirk that humans have. Just let them go ahead and be weird. As long as they continue to feed me, I'll allow it. I won't say anything about it.
Yeah, and they're not like cats. Cats are, extremely possessive. But anyway, welcome back to Cellar Door Skeptics.
The random show.
Yeah, no, that was last week. The last topic for tonight we wanted to talk about is the new solar tariffs.
It's not that new, but it's still something it's important.
It's relevant.
It's been around for a couple weeks.
Yeah.
It's been around for a couple weeks now.
Yeah, well, it's just because you can never make it to the show, so we have to record, other things to replace you sometimes. But,
Stupid life.
It's one of the reason we wanted to cover this is because, we talk about green energy a lot. We talk about environmentalism a lot. And that's something our show has, focused heavily on. We have. And, when I saw this come out, a couple weeks ago, I just was like, oh, man. Yeah. Man, he's hit us in every other facet of my life. And he's like, I'm getting knocked down over and over again. But, man, this one just hurts even more.
It's an area that, like, you would think that the idea of not having to buy fuel or burn carbon fuel and stuff, even if you don't think that humans control global warming and like that we affect it at all, that you would probably think that just a giant gas burning electricity generator pumping fumes into the sky is not going to be as cool or nice as solar or wind energy or something. Like, it just seems to me that like the idea, like the Republican idea of conservatism and bringing the country back to its roots when it was much more naturalistic and wasn't so industrial revolutionized, is like they would like this idea of using natural energy instead of fossil fuels that burn and dump stuff in the atmosphere. And so like you hear these things and you're like, you would think that they would at least leave the environment alone a little bit. Like, sure, you can say that global warming doesn't exist. That's fine. I will never agree with you on that. That's a place where we will never meet because there's too much evidence that says that it does. But I would like to see, a lot of those arguments are just like, well, why should we even try to get away from burning fossil fuels? Like, this seems like, Trump sticking his finger in the eye of a burgeoning energy market that's happening all over the world. And, the U.S. is trying to find a place in it, and we're sticking this tariff right in the middle of it.
Yeah. And it's kind of funny, one of the CNBC articles that you posted talks about Trump basically saying that alternative energy is a waste. It's a big mistake. It's a big mistake, to begin with the whole push for renewable energy. It's like it's being driven by the wrong motivation. The mistakes belief that global climate change is being caused by by carbon emissions. If you don't buy that, don't buy that. I don't buy that. We're going to make America great again. You're like, okay, that's a little improvised, and I'm a little tired here. But what's disgusting is that we have a president that can't understand renewable energy and wants to say, hey, this is that, and that's from his book. I don't know, what was that, 4 years ago or something like that, 3 years ago, and you kind of almost wonder, is that book like a setup to his presidency, right? Did he write a book about how crappy America is and how bad some of these liberal ideas are because he wanted to sell a Republican mantra to get into the office?
I would say that the people that believe that are the ones that believe that Donald Trump is capable of playing 10-dimensional chess. I personally think that he's just he's very good at manipulating the basic needs and wants of the American people, and he's very good at tapping into that mainstream idea of what's popular and what's not. And I got to give him credit; he's good at doing that. So, what's he tapping into here? What is he connecting into that is what's driving this whole entire market? So let's take a look at the two arguments that are happening here. So Trump is basically putting tariffs on incoming foreign-made solar panels. So only the modules, so only the chemically made silica tablet piece, the glass, he wants to put a tariff on of 30%, which will work itself down into 15% after 4 years. And he wants to put a tariff on those. And the argument from the conservative side is that this will protect the American manufacturers who make these and who are being unfairly undercut by other countries who make these panels and will pay slave wages and don't have to pay their employees living wages. And the other argument is that there's only a few manufacturing companies in the United States that actually make these modules. The majority of the solar panel industry is in manufacturing of the entire unit itself, protection and installation and construction and building of new infrastructure. And we'll go a little bit more into those numbers, but those are the two basic arguments, that Trump is trying to protect the manufacturers of the United States from Malaysian and what was the other one? There's Malaysian, Chinese, and there's one other country that's really in South Korean, and they are flooding the U.S. markets with cheap solar panels, and it's hurting American manufacturing. And on the other end, again, is there's not very much U.S. manufacturing that happens here. So those are the basic arguments.
Yeah.
And I want
How
to
many
put
of the
some
solar
numbers
panels
on
are manufactured in the United States versus outside of the United States?
On general, I believe it's like 90%. 95% of solar panels used in the United States are imported from countries like Malaysia and South Korea. This is a quotation from the New York Times. So the vast majority come from outside the world, or outside the United States. And the entire market of the solar panel industry in the United States is roughly 260,000 jobs. But only 2,000 of those jobs are actually involved in making the silica solar panel, the actual solar energy, infrared energy receiving unit.
So hopefully we're going to see another, something else come through that says, okay, hey, we're going to give tax credits, right, to the organizations that are going to now start up in America and build solar panels. Because if only 5% of the solar panels used today are coming from us, and we cut this off, if we're not willing to invest in solar panels in any way, shape, or form, all you did is just cut solar panels out of America. You didn't actually do anything.
You increase the cost for solar panels, basically.
Yeah.
That's essentially what you're doing. Since we don't make them that much here, you're increasing the cost of solar panels in the United States. And so what he's hoping to do is boost the market. So the cheap panels have come into the U.S. and they undercut manufacturers, so they just simply can't exist in the United States. And so the argument is that if you basically block the super low cost panels, that you can start companies and build them in the United States. Which, I mean, that is a valid logical argument. I believe that will happen, but it's not going to be anything near 95%. That it just takes too long to start companies, build stuff, get the technology right. And so what we're talking about here is a major hit to the main flow, the income of this particular chemical unit that is cheaply made due to poor labor laws and protections outside the United States, but. I would say it's almost a fallacy to assume that by doing that one thing in the tariff notion in the United States, that it's just gonna totally boost the market here. And in most cases, what we're seeing, the people that are actually in these markets, they're saying that this is going to undercut them, and they will actually have to reduce, because you're increasing the overall cost of putting in these solar panels, and most of the cost in these solar panels is in putting them together. And so if you simply increase, so it'll be like fuel. So let's say you make this unit, and it takes a gallon of petroleum. And almost all petroleum that comes in the United States comes in from other countries. It's not naturally farmed. It's not natural gas, which we have in abundance due to fracking in the U.S. You just got raw crude coming in from the Arabic Peninsula or wherever. If you put a tariff on that, even though we can make crude oil and petroleum extracted from the tar sands in Alaska, which only does a little bit of what we consume, all you're going to do is increase the cost to the end user, which is the person driving the car. It's the same thing here. Is the end user is the American people who are now getting their energy in small packets from this solar energy. All you're doing is increasing the cost for us. And because those companies that build this stuff are either going to do one of two things. They increase the cost or lower the lower the efficiency of these units for turning solar energy into electrical energy. So it would cost more for the energy you get from them, or it would just they would have to reduce their workforce and lower the total number of these assemblies they're making in the United States.
So I want to play devil's advocate a minute, because again, in the book I'm reading right now, there's a big argument between the original traders, right, and the new traders, because the new traders are bringing slaves in, or they call them indentured servants, right? And they're able to harvest rice and grain a lot cheaper than all these other places, all the normal traders are. So they're being undercut because all these people are basically, again, working for free. And so there's actually a big contest, right, a big argument inside of the book right now where what do you do? How do you fix that? And well, personally, I can't see Trump doing this to make living conditions in other countries better.
And that's what I was going to go to.
But if this is the only means to do that, is by America stepping up saying, fine, you want to send your imported stuff in here, therefore it's going to cost more, and we're going to make money off of it, we should at least in turn be going back and saying, fine, we're going to set up programs in these other countries to give back to them. I don't see that happening. Maybe it will. I highly doubt it, but maybe it will. I'll give him the benefit of the doubt. Maybe. Probably not. But, if we're really that dead set on it, why would we not do that? Because then all it is you saying, well, hey, I want America to make these things, but it's going to cost us more no matter which way you look at it. There's not going to be a way we can produce them in the same manner. And I agree. We need to end world poverty. We need to figure out how to get rid of all these slave labor camps that are making us our cheap Chinese products,
Yeah, and the Malaysian and the Filipino and the South Korean. The South Koreans actually they have very good workforces, but they do not pay them quite as well as the U.S. But regardless to the semantics and of the entire world poverty argument, is in the end what Trump is saying is that he's trying to boost the green energy market in the U.S. And to me, the only way we can do this, and this is an interesting back and forth, a yo-yo that I've been dealing with lately, of dealing with things like the Trans-Pacific Partnership, things that we rallied against last year, and I have basically just says that in our basic conclusions that we came to was that the Trans-Pacific Partnership essentially was benefiting a very small number of people, and it wasn't concentrating on the thing it needed to do, which was increase the quality of life of all the people that are actually lower than the United States. So what we had set the system up for was to basically decrease the cost of manufacturing in the U.S. to try to match the super low costs in other countries. But the direction should have been in the other way around, is these trade agreements should be set up so that they would help benefit the workers in the other countries to bring everybody's wages up, which would in turn make them more competitive with us and make the whole market more competitive, because they wouldn't be flooding their stuff, their cheap products into our markets. But with that aside, which I don't believe this administration would ever support or even remotely form some kind of consensus around, is if you look at the whole idea of we're trying to protect American manufacturing of solar panels. And that sector is so small, it's so minute already, that in the end, what are you doing? You're increasing the overall cost of solar panels, and you're making the green energy market less profitable and less useful for the entire economy. So what that would do is that makes natural gas look a little bit more better. Natural gas costs a little bit more than solar right now, and wind energy actually costs significantly less than both. And coal is up there, and it hasn't really decreased in cost. But weirdly enough, nuclear energy has skyrocketed for the cost of regulation and everything on it. So you can see this all in the New York Times article that we have linked in here. And in the end, really, it's that we've finally seen solar and wind energy drop down below natural gas around 2015, and gas is mad. Big natural gas producers, fracking and that kind of stuff in the U.S. is upset, and this is a major base for Donald Trump's voting electorate. And so this is an area where if they attack solar, that's one less enemy they got to fight, and they'll start moving their way into wind energy in the future. But this is something that will benefit. If solar energy is hurt, this will benefit the natural gas market and businesses in this country. And so it's not so much that he's trying to support the electrical or solar energy generation market. It's almost like he's putting a little bit of a barrier there, saying he wants to make it better, but its long-term effects will be just maintaining our dependence on natural gas and fossil fuels.
Yeah. And, it's kind of funny because inside of the New York Times article, one of the businesses they interviewed makes every piece of the solar panel except for that module, those modules, right? And he said that he's increased from 30 to 350 full-time employees in 3 years. He pays an average wage of $17.31 plus benefits to these people, right? So I'm not going to say that's great, but, that's a lot better than an average worker, On
average for basic companies, that's pretty good, man. Yeah. $17.31 and benefits. I would give them a pretty good rating overall if you take the look at the entire country. Yep. I mean, this is a company that does solar panels, right?
Yeah. Yes. And so while you and I can be, we could be outraged that these other countries are treating their workers awfully, right? And we can be outraged, but we got to stop in a business, right? I would Pareto analysis this. What's the largest harm versus the least harm? What can be fixed the easiest versus the hardest? And while yes, we're essentially raping folks, in other countries. We're raping all these people. Because we're able to reduce the cost of solar panels, we're boosting the environment. Now, the difference is we should be working towards how do we fix that so it can become equal, like you said, in all the other countries. How can we drive up that cost in other countries so that they pay a fairer balance and all the different economies in the world's nations actually start to benefit from that? But what Trump's doing isn't going to benefit either side of it. All he's going to do, like you said, is going to benefit natural gas companies, which in the long run is actually just giving them time to figure out how they can diversify their portfolios. That's it. In my company, we talk about, we look at where our income comes from, and we can analyze it. We can say, well, this one company that we service is 30% of our income. This one is 10%. This one's 4%. We can look at all those things. And our company actually says, why would we want all our eggs in one basket? What if that went south randomly or something happened? So all Trump's doing is allowing for these large corporations to diversify so that when it gets to the point where we have to have solar energy, we don't get a choice, and we start running out of natural resources, they've been able to spend all their extra money, tax-free, on figuring out how they can make a profit off of solar energy. Seems very capitalistic to me.
Well, one of the things that I like to point out is that we always hear about China, who's like subsidizing and feeding their cheap solar panels into the United States. Well, yeah, they are. And you know what else they're doing? They're investing something like $300 billion into renewable energies and green energies, creating something around the area of 3 30 or 33, 35 million jobs in their country in the green energy sector. They're investing like the United States did when we were basically the main manufacturing hub of the entire world after World War II. We invested in bridges and everything. So like whenever you hear about everything saying our infrastructure is 50 years old, yeah, our infrastructure was built in the 50s and 60s, and we stopped after that. We stopped investing in the rest of the country. So the Chinese are investing in that stuff. The South Koreans are investing in that stuff. Their internet is 5 to 7 times faster than ours. Why? Because they're spending money into that. Like the United States isn't doing that. We're falling further and further behind. This is another example of us trying to like during World War II, when we were like, this is not our problem, we shouldn't have to deal with this, until someone blew up a part of our country, we were just like, no, we're not going to deal with this. We're not going to help. We're not part of this entire global whatever. And in the end, I mean, that was a big deal. And so like we need to be part of the total global green energy revolution, because we've seen this in the past. Trump has never really supported green energy. He's always attacked it, and he said that it's a waste of time, it's stupid, it's pointless. We have a link here from phys.org, which is basically physics.org. Anyways, they just go through the things that Trump has said about green energy. Yet, all of a sudden, on this tariff, he's like, oh, we got to protect American manufacturing and green energy. They really need our support. Really? So you're all of a sudden turning on all your buddies in the fossil fuel industry who funded your campaign? I have a hard time believing that. That's one of the reasons why I'm just skeptical of it. So like, we really have to do something to make the United States the leader in this kind of innovation. And this kind of tariff is a direct attack on whether or not the U.S. will be the leader in the next revolution of whatever technical innovations come out of energy production.
Well, hopefully not, but you never know, I guess, right? We never know. We always seem to be on the back end of it.
We're on the bottom of the boot lately, man. It hurts. It hurts.
It does. And speaking of that side article, as we wrap up here, they talk about what you were just saying. Our investment in fossil fuel is massive and global, and the industry has not been shy about converting its economic power into political power. Energy is central to economic life, as air and water is to human life. There are powerful economic organizations and political forces at work resisting the transition to renewable energy. Yet we live in an era of disruptive technology and rapid changing patterns of production and consumption. We carry computers in our pockets, drive cars that will someday drive us, and communicate and gather information at practically no cost. The powerful companies of the last generation are gone, and the powerful companies of the next generation are being invented in someone's garage. These companies that develop cheaper and more reliable, renewable energy and energy storing technologies will drive fossil fuel companies from the marketplace. It would be better for the planet if that happened sooner than later. Since Trump's team doesn't seem to want to help, let's convince them to end their attack on renewable energy and stay out of the way for progress and change. In essence, let's invest to make America great again. Thank you all for joining us tonight. We'll be back next week with another amazing Cellar Door Skeptics. Thank you all, and have a amazingly more awesome, more epic, amazingly more, for Hannah's sake, night. Thank you all, and have a good night, everyone.
You've been listening to a presentation of Cellar Door Skeptics. Check us out on Spreaker, cellardoorskeptics.com.